Hello everyone, Andrew Martin here and welcome to the British Chess Magazine Game of the Month for February 2013. This month I've chosen a typical game from the Grandmaster Group A, Steel, Wijk-aan-Zee, between Fabio Caruana playing with the white pieces and Caruana-L'Ami playing with the black pieces. Not perhaps two of the best known names in this incredibly strong group, but two Grandmasters who conspire to play very interesting game of chess, a hard fought struggle, I think is the best way to describe it, and a game absolutely typical of the grinding chess needed at the highest level to eke out a win. Well, Caruana was white and he played e4, and L'Ami responded with the Caro-Kann defence, whereupon Caruana pushed by with e5. Black played bishop f5. It seems to be a toss-up between this move, which is the traditional way in the Caro-Kann, or 3c5 these days, and now white plays h4, an old move which really came to prominence during the Tao-Botvinnik matches of the early 1960s. This was a move Tao used to employ to try to throw Botvinnik off balance, and it is rather surprising to see after h6 that Caruana actually continues with the Tao-like approach, g4, just throwing caution to the winds, moving his pawn forward at the expense of piece development. Well, L'Ami, if he was surprised, tries hard not to show it, and he drops back with bishop d7. It should be mentioned in this position that if black goes the other way with bishop h7 or something like it, then white has the opportunity to sacrifice a pawn if he wants to with e6. I feel certain this is the type of thing Tao would have loved, and once the pawn is taken, white plays bishop d3. This is a serious pawn sacrifice. It's not totally obvious how white's going to get his pawn back, but it's pretty clear that black's development is going to be gummed up for some time to come. Although black usually plays a move like queen d6 very quickly in a position like this. Well, anyway, going back to the game, L'Ami decides to drop back with bishop d7, just stopping e6 forever. And now h5, pawn up to e6, and now f4. Very, very Tao-like. This is the type of thing Tao was doing against Botvinnik, just making it into an incredibly unclear game. White gains early space at the expense of piece development. And now black counterpunches in the centre, typically with the move c5, whereupon white makes his 8th pawn move in a row by playing c3. So what started life out as a Caro-Kann defence has now transposed into a French defence structure, with black trying to put pressure on white's centre. And L'Ami played queen to b6, a very typical move in such situations. Now actually this line has been played a fair bit recently at a high level, and most of the time black prefers knight c6, knight f3, and now queen b6. You wouldn't think this makes a great deal of difference over the game we're about to see, but it does actually make a difference. Now let's just see how dangerous white's idea can be in the game Gelashvili versus Shankland, played in 2012. White played rook h2 in this position, and black played another very natural move here, rook to c8. Bishop e3, that was the point of rook h2, to protect b2. Black took on d4, Shankland played bishop b4 check, and now the king came to f2. And we now have a position which is very characteristic of the Tarrasch variation of the French defence, where white plays with an early f4, just forming this very broad centre, cramping black. Of course, it's not quite a Tarrasch, because white hasn't moved his knight on b1 yet, but it's a very similar type of structure. Shankland played knight a5, b3, and the problem for black is that he hasn't really got any avenues to attack white. Black played knight e7, white played king to g1, black castled, rook to g2, rook to c7, and now the move that has been on the cards for quite some time, pawn up to f5. And after e takes f5, Gelashvili played g5. Well, it's quite interesting to see how quickly the white attack appears here. Shankland played king h7, white played bishop d3, and now black played rook fc8. And on the face of it, it looks like black's got a really good game. But after king h2, bishop b5, bishop takes, queen takes, g takes h6. Black still lacks targets in white's camp to penetrate with his rooks. Black recaptured, white played a3, bishop c3, and now a thunderous blow, bishop takes h6. So now, if king takes h6, white takes advantage of the blockage of the c file here, playing queen c1 check, and then the queen comes out to g5. And in the game, bishop takes a1 was answered by knight g5 check, king takes h6, and now the splendid move, queen to d2. Threatening knight takes f7 double check, and then queen h6, which will be mate. So that's a type of attack that white can whip up in this line, and why this variation has become popular. Well, L'Ami tries to make it a little bit different. He plays queen b6, knight f3, and now black plays radically different here with bishop b5. Again, a manoeuvre borrowed from the French defence. Black simply tries to get rid of his light square bishop. And this should be okay for him, really. I suppose white gets a free tempo here with knight a3. Black played queen to b6, and now white went queen to a4 check. The computer suggests queen to b3 here, if knight c6, taking off the queens and then putting in the knight on b5. Although it is doubtful whether white can work up any real advantage after king to d7. Although there's no doubt about it, he still has a large advantage in space in this position, and black has yet to find a way to claim full equality. So maybe that was another way. Going back to the game itself, Caruana played queen a4 check, black developed his knight, and now white brought his knight back to c2. Whereupon black took on d4. Okay, now black could have considered, I think here, definitely castling on the queen side. White isn't really in any shape to open up lines against the black king. Maybe b3 is the best he can do, just with ideas of getting this bishop out to a3 maybe. Black can then take on d4, and if takes with the knight, we go takes, takes, knight e7, rook h2, and then king to b8. This seems to me to be a hard position for white to claim any advantage in. Black's exchanged off a pair of minor pieces. He's eased his cramp. This shouldn't be too bad for him. Going back to the game, L'Ami takes on d4. White recaptures with the pawn. He's got more space, he keeps the pieces on, and now black forced the queens off after queen a5 check. So off they came, and now king to e2. Knight came to e7, b3, very useful move in this structure, just keeping the black knight out of c4. Rook to c8, attacking the knight, king d3 defending, knight a c6, bringing the knight back from the edge, and now white played bishop to d2. So patient play by white, a small advantage to Caruana. How will he work with this advantage to make it greater? Well, the first thing he does is to prepare a pawn lever. Black has no entry squares to speak of on the c-file, everything's covered, so white's got some time here to get his act together, and this he does with knight h4 and then f5. I mean, at some stage white's got to open up this position. There's not much joy to be had on the c-file in this position, just some exchanges. So white levers open the position playing f5, and as such I would say increases his advantage slightly. Rook g8, first sign of passivity from black really, and now rook h2. Very good move, defending the second rank, and perhaps with the idea of bringing the rook to f2. So black challenges the centre with f6, and now we see the point of rook to g8. When white takes on f6, as he did in the game, the rook comes into the game. But after knight e3, it's not at all clear whether black hasn't opened up the game to his own disadvantage. White's got better placed pieces, and he's putting pressure on black's centre. You can see there's distinct pressure now on the centre. White's threatening f takes e6, and then knight takes d5. So L'Ami breaks with e5. This looks poor because of knight takes d5. But after rook f7, defending f6, black's got plenty of pressure against this pawn on d4. And obviously now if white tries to resolve the pressure by taking on e5, black recaptures with the knight, and then the pawn at g4 falls. Black's rook on g8 is surprisingly useful in this position. So white doesn't do that. He gums up the g file by playing knight to g6, a much better move, allowing black to take on d4 in the interests of coordination with bishop to e3. Knight comes to c6, king e2, white repositions his king, and now he plays his rook to d2, and both sides double on the d file. So white is maintaining a definite edge in this position. More space, better minor pieces. I mean, that bishop on g7 is most unimpressive, but can he make something of it? Well, Caruana plays king f2, black plays king e8, and white brings his king back to e1. Obscure manoeuvres, but I think white is just putting the pressure on black. Maybe L'Ami was short of time here. This type of thing, manoeuvring when you're better, is an art, and it's an art which Caruana seems to have mastered in this game. This king e1 move, it doesn't look like much, but it's just protecting that rook on d2 one more time, getting the king out of range of knight checks, and saying to black, well, have you got any useful moves? And also, you've got to think about this knight on c8. If he moves up to d6, the knight can come into b6, the bishop can come into b6. Very awkward to find a move for black. So L'Ami tries to solve his problems with tactics. Knight d4. White whips off the knight. Black takes on d5. Bishop c3. Takes. And despite exchanges, black's position has not improved, because white's still keeping the pressure on. And after b6 protecting a5, white goes rook c1, taking charge of the open file. King d7 covers c7, and now bishop e3, pinning that knight down on c8. It's time now to improve the white king still further, so that is what Caruana does, and L'Ami just passes. I mean, he knows he can't do anything here. He's just got to not make things worse. So bishop f8, king e4. White can systematically improve his position. Bishop b4, rook c2. No rush in this position to take on h6. I suppose really that rook d3 check here would have been answered by knight d6 check. So white sees no promise in that. He keeps his rook on the open file, and he moves his king into d5. Now the pressure really is starting to build. So much so that finally h6 has dropped. Knight c3 check. Well, it looks as though this might be bailing black out. Finally, he's got a bit of counterplay. But now Caruana shows the excellence of his position by sacking the exchange. Rook takes c3. Bishop comes back. Well, white's threat's obvious. He's got a dominating king, and he threatens nothing other than just to push this h-pawn up the board. And black really hasn't got any defence against this. He tried bishop d4 in the game. Well, if he tries king c7 with the idea of giving perhaps a check and then defending on d7, we have knight f8 here. I think white can force this pawn home. Knight e6 check. g5. As you can see, the knight on e6 is perfect. Takes, and the pawn comes through. f6. Black's bishop is utterly useless in this position. White can just clean up. So, in the game, L'Ami played bishop d4. Caruana took. Very nice. King takes. The knight's dominating the rook in this position. King c6 making room for a rook check, and a rook check happens, but then g5. And this is, in effect, the winning move. L'Ami resigned. You might think that his position is not yet resignable, but the first point of g5 is clearly that if black takes, white goes knight e5 check, end of game. And if he doesn't take, what on earth could he play? If he plays rook f7, we can just take. Now white has numerous threats. If black recaptures, we go h7. If he doesn't recapture, we're threatening knight e5 check. This is a completely hopeless position for black. So a nice game by Caruana, and who knows, perhaps we're going to see a revival of this system where against the Caro-Kann, white over the first 8 moves or so does nothing but push pawns. It certainly leads to interesting chess.